This campaign was the right fight to wage. And I am proud of what we did and what we did together. This campaign was to contest the philosophies that are shaping the Democratic Party, the future of this city, and the future of this country.
Welcome back to Inside City Hall. That was part of Andrew Cuomo's message to the more than 800,000 New Yorkers who voted for him last week. Following his second defeat to Zohran Mamdani this year, Cuomo is now at a career crossroads after spending more than 40 years in the public eye. Joining me now to talk more about Cuomo and much more, we've got Melissa DeRosa. She is one of Cuomo's most trusted aides and served as a campaign advisor during his mayoral run. Welcome back to the program. Always good to see you.
Thanks for having me, Errol.
Absolutely. So after the primary, Andrew Cuomo told me that he thought that part didn't go well for him because the campaign wasn't aggressive enough. What do you think happened between the primary and the general?
Well, after we lost the primary, we took a couple of weeks, as you remember, Errol. And we did some soul searching. We did some honest reflection about what went wrong in the primary. And we made some real changes. We looked at some math and we decided that it was worth getting in. Not because we believed that we could prevail necessarily, but we believed that if we didn't get back in, you would end up with Zohran Mamdani having a landslide victory. That Eric Adams was polling, consistently in the high single digits, low, 10, 11, 12, that Curtis Sliwa was not a serious contender, and that Zohran Mamdani would have sort of this runaway coronation, that none of his ideas would be contested, that he wouldn't be held accountable for any of his previous statements or for any of his beliefs that we found offensive on some level, particularly regarding Israel and stoking anti-Semitism. And we thought that it was a war worth waging, not because we would necessarily win, but because if we didn't do it, we thought that people would take all the wrong lessons from what happened in the primary.
Okay, well, I want to come back to that, the sort of the philosophical and political side of it. Did you have a turnout model or assumptions when you did put the numbers down?
So, and it's politics is a big chessboard, right? So there was the very narrow path to victory, which we believed could potentially be possible if all the stars aligned, which was Eric Adams gets out, Curtis Sliwa gets out, and you drive the turnout up high enough. And Eric Adams got out, Curtis never got out. Mm-hmm. I think if Curtis had gotten out, even though people say, oh, well, the math still wasn't there, it just would have been a totally different dynamic. Curtis Sliwa spent 95% of his time attacking Andrew Cuomo, not Zohran Mamdani. Mm-hmm. And so we were sitting on a debate stage, which you moderated, and you gave him one question, and he used that question to attack the Democrat who is viewed more as the moderate than the Democratic Socialist, which was sort of off-brand. So I think that the dynamic would have been entirely different. But that was sort of the way to victory. And it became clearer and clearer as October went forward that Curtis was not going to listen to reason, that Curtis was going to stay in for whatever his motivation, and it's been speculated about. I don't know if there was a backroom deal with someone to keep him in. But even the more then, it was increasingly clear that the path was not there, but we were going to fight it out till the bitter end. And I think we did, and I think we left it all on the field.
I've worked with Curtis in the past. He was a regular on the show, and I know him pretty well in a way. He was the Republican nominee. He had a bunch of people on the ticket with him. It wasn't really just about him. So in a way, it was never really realistic to expect the guy at the top of the ticket of the Republican Party to disregard the judges, the council members, all of the people on his ticket and just walk away, right?
Yeah, but I disagree because what difference did it make? At the end of the day, he got 7% of the vote. Vito Fossella still had a resounding victory in Staten Island, regardless of the fact that Curtis got 7% citywide. And that's because Staten Island voters ticket split and they voted for Andrew Cuomo at the top and then they went down and they voted for the Republican. So Curtis, I think, just enjoys the attention. I think his ego is larger than Giant Stadium. And I think the more people pushed him and the more it was clear that he was playing this outsized role, he sort of relished it. And he put himself and his ego above the city, if that's what he actually cared about, given that his views, I think, are much more closely aligned with a moderate Democrat than a Democratic Socialist.
Well, yeah, now let's talk about that. Do you believe that I understand what's said on the campaign trail, but now this is that's over, right? We're going to have a new mayor in about 50 days or so. Is it so bad, the fact that he, it has this adherence to Democratic Socialist ideas and wants to open these grocery stores or whatever, is it so bad that it's an existential threat, that it's going to sort of change New York in ways that just can't be fixed?
I think it's going to depend on the version of Zoran Mamdani that we get. It's going to depend on Albany, and it's going to depend on the people that he puts in his administration. And look, the thing about our campaign that I was particularly proud of, that we haven't seen in this country since before Hillary versus Trump in 2016, maybe even before Obama was elected in 2008, was that this bipartisan coalition came together of Democrats, of independents, and of Republicans because we all believed in capitalism, we believed in fighting back against anti-Semitism, and we believed that this version of what the DSA puts out is, number one, in some ways not realistic, but number two, dangerous. And now we'll see. We'll see. He's 34 years old. He's totally untested. He has no experience whatsoever. And as you and I both know, and viewers of your show know, Albany is going to play an outsized role here in how far and fast he can run and the people he puts in a position of power. At the end of the day, the mayor's job is education, it's public safety, it's sanitation, and those are not ideological positions. But if you put someone in a position like being the head of the NYPD and you say, disband the strategic response group, don't enforce prostitution laws, don't enforce misdemeanors, don't enforce any quality of life crimes, you can start to see the city really go backwards pretty rapidly.
Do you take any comfort in the fact that Dean Foulahan has been appointed? He's got more experience than probably most of the two or three people who had the job before him.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know Dean very well. He's an old hand. Forget about Bill de Blasio. He's, Shelley Silver's right-hand guy. So he is, as seasoned as they come. He is incredibly smart and he understands how to deal with the budget, which, by the way, is going to be critically important because one of the things no one talks about is that there's going to be a giant budget hole to deal with before you talk about unrealistic things like free buses and universal, daycare. So I think that Dean was a good appointment for him. I think it also should bring a lot of comfort to the business community and to others. However, he put Elle as his chief of staff at the same time, and she is as much a zealot as they come. And so it's going to be interesting to see when he's making these appointments, who's going to have the real power? Are these people going to stay if there's some altercation out of the gate? Like, does Jesse Tisch stay on? If, as was reported over the weekend, the DSA put out their list of demands, one of which was, forget about just Benjamin Netanyahu, but if an IDF soldier steps foot in New York City, they should be arrested for war crimes. So if he says to her, the NYPD needs to exercise this on behalf of the demands of my comrades at the DSA, and she says no, who fills that position?
Well, yeah, I mean, we'll find out about that. I wouldn't pay too much attention to what people outside of government say about what's going to happen in government. I got a couple of more questions. One is the conduct of the campaign, especially in the closing weeks. That ad that went up during the debate and then was pulled down, who created that? Whose idea was that?
It was an ad that was created by a social media personality, a comedian who came in at the very end, who put it together, and it was put up. And as soon as it was brought to my attention, other senior people on the staff's attention that it was up, it was immediately pulled down because it hadn't been approved, it hadn't gone through the right legal channels. And so that was a mistake, and we acknowledged it at the time.
I mean, short of that, some of the ones like the trick or treat one and some of these other things, there's a lot of ugliness that sort of came out. And I'm not going to just assign it to your campaign because there were outside groups that were doing stuff that you had no control over. But how do we put the city back together after all of that?
Well, and look, that's a really good message, a really good question, Errol, because on election night, you saw two very different speeches. You saw Andrew Cuomo get up and he congratulated Zoran Mamdani. When the crowd began to boo, he silenced them. He said, that's not appropriate. And then he said, now is the time to come together. We waged our fight so that people heard loud and clear that the message coming out of the primary was not that New York City is embracing the DSA wholeheartedly, and not that New York City embraces fanning the flame of anti-Semitism or anti-Israel or anything else. But at the same time, and by the way, at the end, I believe Andrew Cuomo will have over 900,000 votes when all is said and done, which is more than any mayor in modern history. So he expanded the electorate, so did we. But he did a call of unity and said, now it's our collective responsibility to work together for the good of the city. I'm cheering him on if he can do good things to be successful. At the end of the campaign, both sides fight it out, but then you come together for the country, the state, the city. And then I saw Zoran Mamdani's speech, and everyone from Van Jones to the Washington Post panned it. It's like, where was this smiley, happy guy who for the last year acted like he was the nicest person on the planet and we're all going to do this together? It was like this ugly side of him that was so incredibly divisive. And so when you're the mayor, You have to be the mayor for everyone. And again, going back to the point of our campaign, it was to drive people out and show that this was not just a one-sided situation.
How come Andrew Cuomo didn't call him on election?
You know, that's a question for him, but I don't think it was intentional. He called him on primary night, and he very publicly congratulated him from the stage.
Okay. We're completely out of time, but I have to point out, you know Elise Stefanik, the congresswoman from upstate. You guys went to the Albany Academy for Girls together. You were both in student council together. You wrote in your book that we've talked about here on the air about how you were actually friends and colleagues, even though you were politically quite different up to a certain point. How do you assess her candidacy for governor?
Look, the one thing I will say about Elise Stefanik, knowing her since I'm 12, is she is not someone to be underestimated. So regardless of how people thought about that initial video that came out, she is cunning, she's savvy, she is smart. And I think that Kathy Hochul has left herself incredibly vulnerable on a lot of different fronts now with Zohran Mamdani and her embrace of him in the context of a statewide election. And so I think that if there are avenues and cracks that open up, Elise is going to be able to capitalize on them. And she's just someone who shouldn't be underestimated.
Oh, okay. Thanks very much. I know it was a long, hard road to this point. Thanks for coming in to tell us all about it.
Thank you.
All right.